Marcus sat quietly in the defendant's chair, watching the judge shuffle through papers with barely concealed contempt. For 20 minutes, the court had treated him like just another street criminal. But when Marcus finally stood to speak, his first words sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Because sometimes the person you underestimate the most is exactly the one who holds all the power.
Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and a comment before we start to learn more about what happened.
The fluorescent lights of courtroom 3B cast harsh shadows across worn wooden benches, creating an atmosphere that felt more like Judgment Day than justice. The morning docket buzzed with usual energy as Judge William Harrison processed cases like an assembly line, moving through traffic violations, petty theft, and public disturbance cases with mechanical efficiency. Marcus Williams sat in the defendant's chair, hands folded calmly in his lap, wearing a simple navy suit he'd purchased specifically for this moment. At 26, he possessed quiet confidence that seemed out of place for someone in his position. But to casual observers, he appeared to be just another young man caught up in the criminal justice system. Judge Harrison was a 63-year-old man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses who had built his reputation on being tough on crime. His definition of toughness often correlated directly with the defendant's race and background, and he rarely found joy when dealing with people who appeared before his bench. His permanent scowl suggested someone who had long ago lost faith in the possibility of redemption or rehabilitation. Marcus faced serious charges, aggravated assault and battery from an incident outside a downtown bar 3 months earlier. According to police reports, he had brutally attacked Bradley Hutchins, a 24-year-old white college student, leaving him hospitalized with a broken jaw and several bruised ribs. The charges carried potential prison time of 5 to 10 years. What the reports conveniently didn't mention was the racial slur Bradley used when Marcus accidentally bumped into him in the crowded bar, or that Bradley threw the first punch when Marcus attempted to apologize and walk away, or that multiple witnesses saw Bradley pull a knife during the altercation. Those crucial details were somehow omitted from the official narrative, creating a one-sided story that portrayed Marcus as the clear aggressor. The public defender's office had offered Marcus a standard plea bargain: plead guilty to a reduced charge and serve 18 months in county jail with possibility of early release for good behavior. The overworked attorney assigned to represent him had strongly recommended accepting the deal, explaining that the alternative meant risking a trial where Marcus would face an all-white jury and a prosecutor with an impressive conviction rate. But Marcus had declined the plea bargain, much to everyone's surprise and frustration. He informed the court that he would be representing himself, a decision that prompted eye rolls from prosecutor Rebecca Chen, audible sighs from court staff, and barely concealed amusement from Judge Harrison. Self-representation was usually a guarantee of conviction in cases like this. "Another one who thinks he's a lawyer after watching too much television," Harrison had muttered to his bailiff when Marcus filed his pro se paperwork. "These kids have no idea what they're getting into." This should be over quickly. The morning of trial, the sparsely populated courtroom held the usual collection of observers: a few retirees treating the proceedings like daytime television, some journalism students taking notes for class assignments, and court personnel going through their daily routines. Prosecutor Rebecca Chen sat confidently at her table with a thick case file and the assured demeanor of someone who had never lost a case like this. She had built her reputation on securing convictions in seemingly hopeless situations. Victim Bradley Hutchins sat with his parents in the front row, occasionally touching his jaw as if to remind everyone of his injuries. His mother dabbed at her eyes with tissues while his father glared at Marcus with barely concealed hostility. The family's expensive clothing and confident bearing suggested people accustomed to having their voices heard and their grievances addressed. Marcus sat alone at the defense table, occasionally making notes in a legal pad, but otherwise appearing calm and collected. He had spent the previous 3 months preparing for this moment, not just reviewing the evidence and studying legal precedents, but preparing himself mentally for what he knew would be an uphill battle against a system designed to work against people who looked like him. Judge Harrison called court to order with his customary efficiency, immediately setting a condescending tone that made his expectations clear. "Mr. Williams," he said, not bothering to look up from his papers initially, "I see you've decided to represent yourself in this matter. While that's certainly your constitutional right, I strongly advise you to reconsider this decision. These are extremely serious charges with significant potential consequences, and the legal system is far more complex than it appears on television shows." His tone carried the patronizing quality of someone speaking to a child who had gotten in over his head, making it abundantly clear that Harrison had already formed opinions about the likely outcome of the trial. "I understand the seriousness of these charges, Your Honor," Marcus replied with calm respect, his voice carrying none of the nervousness Harrison typically heard from pro-se defendants. "I'm confident in my ability to present an adequate defense." Harrison finally looked up from his paperwork, studying Marcus with the kind of clinical detachment usually reserved for examining evidence specimens. "Mr. Williams, do you have any formal legal training? Have you ever studied law at any institution or worked in any legal capacity whatsoever?" The question was carefully crafted to establish incompetence before the trial even began, creating a record that could later justify a quick conviction. "I have some familiarity with legal proceedings, Your Honor." "Some familiarity," Harrison repeated with obvious skepticism, allowing a slight smile to cross his lips. "Well, Mr. Williams, I sincerely hope for your sake that your familiarity extends to understanding the extremely serious nature of these proceedings and the potential consequences you're facing. Prosecutor Chen, please proceed with your opening statement." Chen presented a methodical case, painting Marcus as an angry young man who attacked an innocent victim. She showed photographs of Bradley's injuries, medical records, and police testimony. Bradley took the stand, recounting events with practiced ease. "I was leaving the bar when he bumped into me," Bradley testified, hand moving to his jaw. "I just asked him to watch where he was going. Next thing I knew, he was throwing punches. I was defending myself." Harrison listened with obvious sympathy, nodding and taking notes. When Chen finished, Harrison turned to Marcus with barely concealed impatience. "Mr. Williams, this would be excellent time to reconsider that plea bargain. The prosecution presented a strong case. Are you sure you want to proceed?" Marcus stood slowly, movements deliberate and confident. "Yes, Your Honor, I'm quite sure." Harrison shrugged as if the defendant had been warned. "Very well. Present your defense." Marcus walked to the courtroom center, positioning himself to address both judge and audience. When he spoke, his voice carried unexpected authority and precision. "Your Honor, we've heard only half the story. As any first-year law student knows, half-truths are more dangerous than lies because they contain just enough fact to seem credible." Harrison's eyebrows rose at the sophisticated language. "Get to your point, Mr. Williams." "My point is this. The prosecution's case relies entirely on testimony from Mr. Hutchins and responding officers, neither providing complete truth about that evening." Marcus called Jennifer Martinez, a nurse who witnessed the altercation. Her testimony systematically destroyed the prosecution's narrative. Bradley had used a racial slur when Marcus bumped into him and threw the first punch when Marcus tried to leave. "I was shocked by the language," Martinez testified. "When the defendant tried to apologize and leave, the victim grabbed his arm and started swinging." Marcus questioned her with seasoned attorney skill, establishing that Bradley had been drinking heavily and was hostile throughout the evening. Two additional witnesses corroborated Martinez's account about the racial slurs and Bradley's aggression. But the most damaging moment came when Marcus recalled Bradley for cross-examination. "Mr. Hutchins, you testified you didn't say anything offensive. Is that correct?" "That's right," Bradley replied confidently. "I just asked you to be careful." Marcus retrieved a small device. "Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Defense Exhibit A, an audio recording from a nearby security camera." The courtroom fell silent as the recording played. Despite imperfect quality, Bradley's voice was clear, using the exact racial slur witnesses described, followed by sounds of altercation. Bradley's face went pale as his own voice contradicted his sworn testimony. "Mr. Hutchins, you've just committed perjury. You lied about using racial language, didn't you?" I don't remember exactly what I said," Bradley stammered. "It was stressful." "You don't remember calling me the N-word? We all just heard you do exactly that." Harrison's expression had changed dramatically, contempt evolving into something approaching respect, mixed with considerable confusion about how this defendant had obtained evidence that eluded police. Marcus presented cell phone video showing Bradley pulling a knife, contradicting police reports. He called the bartender who testified about Bradley's aggressive behavior. Most importantly, he demonstrated that police investigation was superficial, failing to interview key witnesses or collect crucial evidence. "Your Honor," Marcus began his closing, "this case represents everything wrong with our justice system. Everyone assumed I was guilty from the start. No one looked for truth because it was easier to accept the narrative fitting their preconceptions." Harrison found himself watching his assumptions being methodically dismantled. "The prosecution wants you to believe I attacked Mr. Hutchins unprovoked, but evidence shows the opposite. He used racial slurs, threw the first punch, and pulled a knife. I was defending myself against racist attack, not committing crime." Marcus paused before delivering his final argument. "Your Honor, I stand before you not as victim or defendant, but as American citizen believing in justice, the same justice applied differently depending on skin color. Today, I ask this court to look beyond assumptions and see the truth presented." Harrison sat in stunned silence. The transformation was palpable. What began as routine conviction had become something else entirely. "Mr. Williams," Harrison said slowly, "before I render verdict, where did you learn to practice law with such skill?" Marcus smiled for the first time. "I graduated Harvard Law School last year, Your Honor, passed the bar 3 months ago. This case prevented me from starting my civil rights firm position, so I decided to handle my own defense." The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Harrison's mouth fell open. The prosecutor looked mortified. Even the bailiff seemed stunned. "You're a licensed attorney?" Harrison asked, still processing. "Yes, Your Honor. I apologize for not mentioning it, but I wanted to see how I'd be treated as just another defendant. The answer is exactly as I expected." Harrison realized he'd spent the morning talking down to a Harvard-trained lawyer with casual disrespect, reserved for defendants he assumed were guilty. "Based on evidence presented and clear contradictions in victim testimony, I find you not guilty on all charges," Harrison announced. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Bradley Hutchins sat stunned while his parents looked confused about their son's defeat. But Marcus wasn't finished. As Harrison prepared to dismiss court, Marcus stood once more. "Your Honor, if I may address the court one final time?" Harrison nodded, still off balance from the revelations. "What happened here illustrates a fundamental justice system problem. From entering this courtroom, I was presumed guilty. Police didn't investigate thoroughly because they assumed they had their man. The prosecutor didn't look for exculpatory evidence, assuming the case was straightforward. This court was prepared to railroad me because I looked like someone who belonged here. Marcus looked around the courtroom, making eye contact with everyone present. I was fortunate to have education and resources for proper defense. But how many other young men like me don't have those advantages? How many innocent people sit in prison because they couldn't afford adequate representation or because investigators couldn't be bothered looking for contradictory evidence? Harrison sat quietly, uncomfortable with the accuracy of Marcus's observations. I don't say this to embarrass you or this court. I say it because we can do better. We must do better. Justice isn't just following law. It's ensuring law is applied fairly regardless of defendant's race, class, or background. As Marcus gathered papers to leave, Harrison called out, "Attorney Williams, a moment, please." Harrison stood up, something he rarely did for departing defendants. "I owe you an apology," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I made unfair and wrong assumptions about you. You've shown me something about myself I need to address." It was unprecedented, a sitting judge publicly apologizing to a defendant in open court. Marcus nodded respectfully. "We all have biases, Your Honor. The important thing is recognizing them and working to overcome them." As Marcus left, word spread throughout the courthouse. Within hours, local news picked up the story of the Harvard Law graduate who defended himself and won. Court camera footage went viral within days, with Marcus's closing argument about systemic bias viewed millions of times, sparking nationwide conversations. Judge Harrison faced disciplinary review, but kept his position after agreeing to bias training and courtroom reform. The prosecutor's office launched internal investigation into their missed evidence. Bradley Hutchins was charged with perjury, but received only probation through plea agreement. For Marcus, the case became foundation for criminal justice reform career. He joined the ACLU, specializing in prosecutorial misconduct and inadequate representation cases. His self-defense experience became a teaching tool, illustrating both system problems and skilled advocacy power. The law firm that hired Marcus held his position and offered promotion when he joined. His story became recruitment material, demonstrating their commitment to justice-fighting attorneys. Marcus often spoke at law schools about his experience, encouraging young lawyers toward public interest careers. He emphasized that legal skills meant nothing without courage to use them for justice and fairness. The case catalyzed broader local criminal justice reforms. Police implemented new investigator training, emphasizing thorough evidence collection regardless of initial assumptions. The prosecutor's office established protocols for reviewing cases and ensuring exculpatory evidence wasn't overlooked. Most importantly, the story reminded everyone that appearances deceive and everyone deserves dignity and respect, regardless of circumstances. It showed that sometimes the most important justice battles happen in small courtrooms where individual dignity meets systemic bias and emerges victorious. Years later, as a successful civil rights attorney arguing appellate cases, Marcus often thought back to that morning in courtroom 3B. It crystallized his understanding of both power and responsibility that came with legal knowledge. The experience taught him that justice wasn't just winning cases, it was changing systems, challenging assumptions, and ensuring everyone entering a courtroom received the dignity and fairness law promised, but didn't always deliver. Marcus Williams became one of the country's most respected civil rights attorneys, but never forgot the lesson learned that day. Sometimes the most powerful advocate for justice is someone who refuses to accept injustice, even when everyone expects them to.